I made a video the other day on the male loneliness epidemic, and it's currently reaching a demographic I never seek to cater literally anything to ever, and for good reason, and they're very mad at me. And I am here not to apologize, but to double down. I think sometimes people need things explained to them very clearly. Like, I think sometimes sarcasm requires too much brain power for someone. And I think a lot of times people often opt for the path of least resistance mentally, and that's not always the most fruitful nor productive. So let me walk you through this step by step. I am not mocking male loneliness. That's just not something that you saw me doing. I'm certainly not mocking men's mental health. That also was not present in that video. That's a conclusion that you jumped to on your own. Again, probably because it required the least amount of brain power. I was mocking, however, the implication that the male loneliness epidemic is a problem that women have to solve. It's somehow both created by women and has to be solved exclusively by women. That is how it's been presented in multiple articles that I've read. I know. I read. I read these little things called articles and the news. It's a little hobby I took on to stay, educated. It's something I pride myself on because knowledge is power, and I don't want to be a dead battery like some people, you know what I mean? So that is how it is being presented in the world. I'm actually a huge advocate for men expressing their emotions. I'm a huge advocate for men going to therapy. I think that's incredibly helpful. It's a very powerful tool. I wish it was more accessible to everyone. And I also am a huge advocate of men having meaningful connections in their life called friendships, right? Because as women, we spend so much time and energy cultivating and fostering very meaningful and very fulfilling female friendships in our life. That is true of every single woman I know and have ever met, and for myself. And I think that's largely in part why there's no such thing as the female loneliness epidemic. I'm seeing a lot of people thinking that they can flip it around. Okay, well, if men were saying this about women, so the what you are describing in this moment is the patriarchy. It's how the world has literally existed since the dawn of time. You were not pulling a fast one on me. You were just explaining the world in which we live. What a fabulous observation. I'm so exhausted by it. And if we're really going to get into like the disparities between men and women's health, is that what we want to do? That's a game I'm winning every single time. Unfortunately, it's a game I'd love to lose, but statistically speaking, women's health is not nearly as high of a priority in the world as men's health. There's like a bajillion studies to back that up. Again, in these things that I read called articles and called news and factual information. And so I think that's a losing battle for you every single time. And I also, there's a lot of people being like, okay, well, you still shouldn't mock men because, this is a joint effort. Totally. And where have they been? Look at the world in which we are living currently. We would not be here if men were supporting women. We would not be here if men were constantly in a position where they cared about women's issues. We would not be here. We would not live in this world if men cared about women's issues. So that narrative is exhausting to me because so it always falls on women to support men's issues. Where are you? Where have you been? And I'm not trying to compare apples to oranges because, quite frankly, I support men's mental health 100% wholeheartedly. But it's a very interesting argument to have when you take a step back and look at the world in which we live, which looks very different for them because it's a world created for and by them to succeed.